Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Welcome to show number 9 of the Creative Quarantine Sessions. We have a great guest that you're going to meet in just a moment. But first, as always, I'd like to give a shout out to the man behind the curtain, our technical director, Mr. Alan Delinka. Thank you for making the magic happen. And to our composer based in New York, Mr. Nathan Avakian. Thank you for that beautiful theme. Let's keep this show moving forward. I'm going to bring ahead my co-host, Miss Caryn Novak, and Caryn will introduce us to our guest.
Thanks. Welcome, everyone. We're happy to have you join us today. And we're delighted to have director and production designer Traci Hays joining us today from sunny California. In just a little over a decade, Traci has built a substantial body of work as both production designer and art director. Her credits include the upcoming rom-com, A Nice Girl Like You, starring Lucy Hale, Darkness Falls, Dead Girls Detective Agency, Driven, and Dark Web, to name a few. Going from designing to directing is not a common leap, but Traci has nearly a dozen directing credits to her name. She's been able to channel the strong visual abilities she's developed through her design career into her role as a director. Her directorial credits include 40-ish, Disconnected, Frederick, and Dry Spell. Traci has an ongoing relationship with Tuska Must's company, Passionflix. Their newest film, Gabriel's Inferno, is set to release this in about a week on Friday, May 29th. Her work in film, television, and commercial has been produced by Universal, Funny or Die, BET, and Mar Vista Entertainment. It's been a joy working with Traci on a couple of features. We've shared a lot of laughs. Traci is dedicated to the work, passionately creative, and loves to collaborate. Traci has connected with the art of storytelling since childhood, and we're excited to hear about her journey so far. We'd love to welcome Traci Hays to the session.
Hi.
Hello. Good morning.
I don't think I need to say anything else. Caryn nailed it.
It's great to see you.
I'm like, okay, what else?
You are our second guest joining us from the West Coast, so good morning to you.
Yes, right. It's not too early. I mean, I still have, but we're good.
Yes.
Yeah, I love
I know there are a lot of people excited to see you here today, including your mother.
Oh,
Caryn.
God. Hi, Mom. Sorry.
Speaking of your mother and your family and your early childhood, let's start at the very beginning. Right. A very good place to start, right?
Yes.
Tell us about how your passion for storytelling began, the influence that theater and film had on you as a child.
Yeah, it started pretty early on. I mean, I think I was always getting into trouble because I wanted to not do schoolwork and, go paint something or run outside and get dirt all over me. And I think there was an instinct to just be creative. And I wasn't really good at reading because I'm dyslexic. So I think there was part of me that just developed visual storytelling kind of from an early age. So I started sort of making my own little stories, writing little short stories. I enjoyed creative writing. I started doing plays with whoever I could get to come be my ridiculous city mouse and country mouse. I did this ridiculous, hilarious little recreation of the Wizard of Oz with my little American Girl dolls on little fishing line over our over the staircase. We recreated the whole Wizard of Oz, and I think I got the idea from watching The Sound of Music, which is one of my favorite musicals. But I've seen dozens and dozens and dozens of great MGM classics, Singing in the Rain, The Wizard of Oz. I think that's sort of where everything kind of began,
Right. Yeah. And you had a tradition of Friday night movie night, right?
Yeah. I think it was great because we weren't really tied to the television every day. It was like Saturday morning Saturday morning cartoons. And then we got to go down the street to our rental. For all those older people that know what it's like to actually have to leave your house to go rent a movie, that was a thing. And we would pick out 4 or 5 different movies, and most of them were musicals. So we got to watch them every Friday. It's fun.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And that's great that there was sort of a time set aside for that too, because it's really so important to be kind of out in the world, living your life and experiencing kind of everything you can. That's just as valuable as watching movies, right?
100%. I mean, I definitely remember watching even, very little television. It was mostly movies. Yeah.
That's great. Very cool. And the MGM musicals is a great way of sort of tying your love of putting on live theater performances and exploring how that could be translated into film as well.
Yeah, I didn't really understand. I was so young. I didn't really understand like that was a thing you could make money and make a career out of. I just thought it was cool.
on a subconscious level, it deeply affected you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about your jump from childhood into choosing to study this as a profession when you finally did realize that this is in fact a viable career path, that you can make money making movies, etc. What was that transition like?
I think the first film class I ever took was actually at my local junior college in the Bay Area in San Jose, Northern California. I think I was 14 or 15, and I took my first film class where I got to shoot on black and white 16 millimeter. And I would just remember going like, give me a camera. I don't know what I'm doing, but I just want to shoot something. I was so excited that I had this thing that I could go make a moving image. Because before that I had just, played around with my grandfather's still photography camera. But I think that was sort of the transition that led to me to understanding a little bit more about the craft. So I would say I studied it at a local junior college level for a couple years, sort of getting my GE out of the way. So I knew that I wanted to transition to Los Angeles to go to film school ultimately. And I don't think it was till I was in my early, like I think it was 18 or 19 when I went to go tour all the film schools in Los Angeles with my mom. And I remember going to, it was Chapman University. I toured the new film school before the paint had dried. Like it was so new. I remember there was still like, those drop cloths and like, I didn't want to touch the walls. And I'm like, wow, this is so cool. There's like sound stages, and they were, and of course that was probably a year before I ended up eventually applying there. But, I toured everywhere. I probably went to a dozen different film schools all over Los Angeles, sort of. But I just knew that that was something I was called to do. Like, I just really wanted to pursue film. I did a lot of it locally when in San Jose, just through the local junior college. And it was a great stepping stone and sort of laid the foundation for my sort of training, so to speak. So I was a video editor for 2 years at a post house. Even while I was in junior college, I was close to where I lived, and I would edit these wedding videos, which
That's cool.
I was like, no more wedding video editing.
Yeah, but that's a good experience. And while you were at Chapman, you had a couple of mentors too, right? Could you speak to the importance of having a mentor and how they helped shape your early vision?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say I'm trying to think who I met first. I think it was Larry Paul, who unfortunately passed away last year. He made he production designed films like Blade Runner, Back to the Future, Romancing the Stone, some amazing classics from the 80s. And when I applied and eventually got into Chapman, I studied design and directing, and he was one of my mentors early on, who just would tell these crazy stories about the business and, how his, ridiculous stories and experiences. And I just remember going like, wow, is this really what it's going to be like? It's so crazy. Like, how do people really do this? Like, and I also had Martha Coolidge, who's a wonderful director. She did movies like Real Genius. She did Valley Girl with Nicolas Cage back in the day. And she was my directing mentor for the 2 years I transferred into Chapman. And she gave me such great advice with all my senior thesis films, and just kind of, trying to challenge me to really think about the story and what was necessary to include. And then I had John Badham, who's a wonderful director. He's done a lot of television. He directed famously Saturday Night Fever with John Travolta. And he was also another directing mentor of mine, and just gave me a lot of great insight into just how to structure story. And then final but not last, Randall Kleisler, who was, I was awarded a mentorship with him. He directed Grease, he directed Blue Lagoon. He's done a lot of stuff with new technologies now and is breaking some ground there. And him and I have stayed in touch over the years. He's been nothing but supportive, and he really helped my senior thesis project along to get to where it ultimately was. So I feel very fortunate to have had just the people, There's others. I'm definitely forgetting a few, like Mel Cooper, who's a wonderful set decorator, and Dan Leonard, who was he was associate dean. All these people just help shape my time when I was there. So.
Yeah, mentorship is definitely key. So something that you've mentioned that is really unique, and another reason that we're so excited to have you here today, is that you, from a pretty early point, decided that you were going to pursue directing and design. That's not that's not really a typical path for a filmmaker to choose, right? Studying both. So how did you make the decision that you wanted to study both, and how was your time kind of split at school?
That's it's funny. It's almost subconscious. I don't think there was I think for me, one of the great things that Chapman gave us was, it's not just like you focus in your one discipline. You really had, when you're not directing, if that was your discipline, or if you were an editor, for example, you also had to do other projects and that maybe weren't editing. So you really had to learn every position. And I think instinctually, I love storytelling, and I love the creative and the storytelling aspect of working with actors and the design, just from my past. But I really got a taste of it when I helped start designing actual building sets on the soundstage at Chapman. And I think I minored in design because I enjoyed it, and I knew I didn't want to be working at Starbucks or working at a, outside of, not that Starbucks is a bad place, but I just didn't want to not be in film, and I wanted to be able to be in it and stay creative. And I knew that I had a skill set and I enjoyed it. And so I wanted just to have sort of the backbone to be able to do that while also pursuing something else that I really loved. And I think that ultimately, helped me stay in the middle of the business and be able to work on films. And honestly, from the moment I graduated, I just started working on films. And I think that was so, I think, key to keeping in the middle of it, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
How did you land, like, how did you get onto your first job in the industry, and what did you do?
It's funny because I don't actually remember how I ended up getting the job. I think it was just I think it might have been whoever was directing or producing it went to Chapman, I think, and I just knew them.
Right.
And it was this Nike commercial, I believe, it was in Orange County, and I was like an art PA on it. And let's just say I never PA'd after that job again. There's nothing wrong with it. There was nothing wrong or nothing. There's nothing bad about the shoot itself. I was just like, oh hell, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be. I think I was like running water to talent, and I'm like, how is this being creative? I'm not doing any art. I'm just, I was exhausted. I was like sneezing from the dust. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore.
It's great that you learned that early on and that you try different things, because the path is not direct in this industry, and it's good to try things out and know what you want to do.
Absolutely not.
So like, with that first PA experience, you knew you didn't want to do that. How did you end up getting to design your first film? And actually, I'm going to bring up some slides from your first film.
Great. Yay, time lapse. Yeah. That was what an endeavor. I because I had done a handful of films in college, like outside of Chapman. I worked with AFI. I did some like just short films. Like I was like, okay, I'm not working yet. I'm still in school. Let me just get as much experience. So I kind of already had a little portfolio going. So when I graduated, I could kind of show, here's what I've done. And so that was one of those situations with time lapse where I went in for a meeting. I met the director and the producer, and we started talking about science fiction and the love for the story. And I was like, oh my gosh, you said the magic words. I love that it was about time machine. I'm like, oh, that sounds like fun. And so the slides that you see are actually of the main hero's living room. And it was thinking back, I'm like, wow, that was a really daunting undertaking for my first feature as a designer, because we took an existing apartment complex that was slated by the city to be demolished, completely to the ground, demolished. And we were given permission to shoot in the entire complex, which gave us flexibility, as you can see in this photo, to knock down the wall. We were knocking down walls, pulling up carpet, taking out windows. So it was a really creative freedom, and that we were able to utilize every piece of oh yeah, that's a great example. There's graffiti. It was definitely not pretty when we got there. There was, squatters and goodness knows what else there. But yeah, it was weird. It was definitely abandoned. Like I feel like there was some rooms that had a lot of stuff, and it was definitely a creative interest. I'm curious of the story about it, but I know it's gone now. But this was almost 10 years ago. So those are the sets. The main house. We did it. That slide that you have up that's the time machine.
That's almost like that's a character in itself in the film. How did you get to?
It was. The director Bradley. He had a very specific vision for what the time machine would do. It took Polaroid photographs in the future.
Right.
And I had a fabricator that I worked with who honestly put the whole thing together in terms of we were just kit bashing basically, because there was no blueprint. But that was probably the coolest set that I have ever. It was all cameras, so I got to buy a ton of old vintage camera bits and pieces, and I spent all this time on eBay and thrift stores, and I got to buy all these pieces. And this set I was most nervous about because one of the lead, or one of the characters the person who invented or put this together in the film was played by Rhys-Davies, who's like one of my, at the time, I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, and I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to be on the set. It has to look great.
Yeah.
So I was so nervous. We did a walkthrough with him the day that it was finished, and I was just like so nervous because I was like, oh, what if he doesn't like it? And he sat down in that chair that you see in that image and was just like, well, Traci, good job. With his little pipe in his mouth. And that really was like, okay, I can do this.
Was this functional on set? Like it looks like it lit up, and
you could sort of, if you could, somebody went inside and was able to control when things were lit up, or when like the shutter would open and close to take photos. It was pretty. It was like a little fort, but it was small. I mean, you didn't want to be in there for too long.
Right. And what inspired, like, did you get inspiration from different sources, or like, how did you go about coming up with the design and the look for this?
Oh man. I mean, so many, I think it just stemmed from the storytelling, like from the story in terms of where the characters had been and where they were going and what their interests were, and spending a lot of time with the director just going, okay, where are all these characters coming from, and how can we communicate that visually? And loving film, like cameras as much as being on set too. I that love sort of poured out into that set that you saw, and then all the other sets. We kind of had this very retro sort of 70s, because they couldn't really afford much, so it was all thrifted and very like, these are kids living in this little bungalow. So we kind of wanted to make it feel like a little hip, because they were trying to be, because there's a female played by Danielle Pennebaker, and she was I'm like, she would have made it nice, so we try to make it, spruce it up. So yeah, just stuff like that. I mean, there's plenty more, but
yeah, no, that's a huge undertaking for your first film to design.
Yeah.
And I'm staying with the slides, and we're going to jump ahead a little to another film you designed, A Nice Girl Like You. And this film was also shot on location. And can you tell us a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of shooting on a location and some of the experiences of this?
Yeah. Oh, that set, man.
Before.
Yeah, before.
After.
Karen, we worked on this together. She was my set decorator and knocked us out of the park, because we had 48 hours to do that, to do what you just saw. It was crazy. I still have PTSD from.
Let's do that back and forth again. That's an amazing.
Yeah, back and forth. I was like, that was a hotel. That was actually a hotel. Yes.
Yeah.
Before. Yeah. After. Yeah. So A Nice Girl Like You was actually the first job I met Karen on. And it was a huge undertaking. I think, to answer your question about location filmmaking, I think the advantage is you're able to get shots that you wouldn't necessarily organically get when you're on a soundstage, being able to shoot out windows. I mean, depending on the shots or what's happening, but there is something nice about just the organicness of being on location and being able to be in the neighborhood and get to know the area. And, I think, with this particular film, building sets is very expensive and time consuming. And a lot of films opt to shoot on location because it's more cost effective. I mean, the disadvantages is that you're not able to fly a wall away or lower a light in the shot, or if it's raining and you're shooting a scene and the weather, we're not weather dependent on a soundstage. So there's a ton of other reasons why you'd want to shoot. But I think for this, location filmmaking, it's a great place to cut your teeth on designing, because you kind of have to take what's there, like in this particular shot, and we put a facade on the fake house. So you take a design and then you have to figure out a way how it fits into the storytelling and what we're going to change. So it's a different kind of problem solving, I think.
Absolutely. So very rarely do we have this opportunity to have the set decorator and production designer in the conversation together on our show. So what are some of the conversations that you two had in the process of of making this happen, and this is your first time collaborating together.
Yes.
So how do you kind of form that bond early on, so that way, throughout the production, it's smooth sailing for both of you?
I was like, Karen, we have to go to Dunkin' Donuts and get hot chocolates 2:00 in the morning, and we have a set to deliver in the morning.
Yeah. You kind of bond in the fire because we had you have a limited prep time, and you're just thrown into the fire, and I think you bond with the intensity of the time frame.
Yeah, and you have to have a sense of humor, because I'm like, I'm just like, I can't go through this fire with somebody who takes themselves too seriously.
We do not take ourselves. Yeah, we don't take ourselves seriously, but
no,
we know how to be serious, but we don't take ourselves seriously. It's a fun mix.
I thought Karen, I think Karen was just really, she was like crazy about like every weekend, like state sales, and like it was always about the character. Just like you literally put the character hat on as though you're character, and you don't stop thinking about it until the movie's over. Like Karen is that's just a bulldozer.
And I take from Traci, and like that's how it's. So Traci is amazing, and she gives you a clear idea of what she wants, and it makes it very easy to go out and get that done. Yeah. And we worked with the brothers Rydell, who are, they're especially supportive. And do you feel like that allows for more flexibility in your creativity when you have like producers and directors that are behind you that support your vision, and they know clearly what they want? And
I mean, I think there's a balance, because I have worked with directors who that give you the freedom, and then they don't tell you till it's too late that they don't like things, but they don't communicate it up front. And they just expect you to read their minds, and you're like, well, I love the freedom, but you also don't want to have too much freedom to the point that you don't know what they like. So I think, but when you have a supportive team of people who like give you a sense of, okay, Traci, here's our references. I love these films, but we trust you. That's why we hired you. Like, that's the best thing, is to have somebody who like supports you, gives you a little bit of advice. Or not advice, but just gives you ideas of what they want. So I prefer that, because there's nothing worse than having somebody go, okay, I want this color teapot and this color countertop, and you're just like, oh, what am I? I feel like I'm just a puppet,
Yeah.
Right. Going back to the lonely goat herd days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So where do you draw your inspiration when you have that first conversation with the director? Are you pulling from films and books and music and everything, or do you kind of have a pretty routine process of research at this point?
Honestly, it comes down to how much prep time I have, because I think, you could research for years. I mean, especially with period pieces. I mean, I want to stay true to the vision of the director, but also what creatively we can tell through the period or the time frame. So I think I start with visual imagery. I do this honestly for both directing and designing. I just start with mood boards and Pinterest, and just start pulling images that say something to me. And I do that for every job. And then depending on how much time I have, I'll get more specific. I'd love to have time to actually go to certain places and have time to do the research, but a lot of times I'm not given that time. But I do as much as I can. Most of it is visually driven for me. I don't, when I'm directing, I put together music playlists, but most for design, it's just about how to tell the story visually. And sometimes I'll watch movies if the director has like given a specific reference that maybe I haven't seen before. But it's just sort of like, I'm open to all of it, because I've gone to museums and I've gotten an idea for something and then changed my script based on a thing so it's sort of like creativity is from all places, so yeah.
So let's jump to a recent project that was particularly challenging. Thank you, Karen and Alan, for the slides here. The Dead Girls Detective Agency. So often filmmakers are trying to avoid having their work being seen on a cell phone. And this was a project that Snapchat put out, which is designed for vertical viewing on a cell phone. So tell us, these are beautiful sets that you really get kind of a limited view when you're watching the show. Can you tell us what the challenge was of designing for a vertical format project?
I mean, I felt like I was starting all over again. You know, you kind of were just like, I'm back in school. Like, how do you communicate the story? Because when you're shooting, 240 or you're shooting super, why do you don't really think about what's on the floor as much? I mean, obviously, as you want to fill a space with everything so the actor has stuff to play off of. But early on, we had conversations about, do we just do vignettes where you just like in that photo, like just do the fireplace and nothing else? And then, I mean, it would look odd if you walked into the room, you'd be like, it's not finished. And ultimately last minute, we decided that we just wanted to do the whole space because the director wanted flexibility and with where they were going to point the camera. I mean, ultimately it costs more money, but I think that gives you the flexibility on the day where you're not like, oh, I can't point in that camera there, because if we're only doing certain portions, we would start to see the unfinished set. So I think that at the beginning, we were going to just do it vignettes, and then we ended up just doing the whole room. So it actually ended up being almost similar to how I would, design any other sort of project. But the difference was now I was worried more about what was on the floor and what was on the wall. I mean, I always worry about that, but more so because that's the only thing in the frame. And we had a ton of practicals. We lit that entire show. We had like I would say like 50 or 60 practicals. We had so many practicals because, we wanted to be able to bring it in the frame and light, So a lot of the behind the scenes photos, all you see is like, grip, a flag and a light. You're like, what? But it's all about the vertical. And the one thing that it was interesting that I don't know if other shows do this, but with this show, the monitor was still horizontal. So you're still looking at the monitor horizontal, but there's two cutouts with little lines around where they were gonna cut the frame and be able to basically get two shots out of one frame.
Okay. Huh. So, and this show is actually, it had quite a wide reception. There were over 1 million viewers, right?
Yeah, I mean, this was the second season. So the first season was shot somewhere different and we weren't able to gain access to it. So we actually had to bring in some elements that were familiar because it was technically the same space. So the wallpaper was a key element in bringing it back. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely for a younger audience. I think Snapchat has really done a really great job cornering this market, and they already had a great platform and viewers to sort of have the show become successful. They've done other vertical format shows. I mean, it's a whole world that I'm like, no, I don't really know much about. I'd rather watch a movie on a big screen, but that's that's how you grow up, I guess. So, yeah.
Well, we will see how that format evolves.
I know. I'm copy.
Full disclosure, we were trying to create.
I forgot.
No, it's all good. We didn't really rehearse it fully. We had a whole moment planned for you viewers at home. This little kind of like this coffee break, but
we
that's
tried.
as close as you're gonna get. Yeah. We didn't have enough prep time for that gag.
That's okay.
Oh man. So very cool. So Dead Girls Detective Agency Snapchat project. Very good. Let's move on to the Women's Weekend Film Challenge. I will say one thing that's been really great about our show, the Creative Quarantine Sessions, is we've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of brilliant women working in film in different capacities over the past few weeks here, and there are some programs that exist that are really celebrating the women that work in this industry and elevating their work. Often doesn't get enough recognition. So can you tell us about some of these projects that you've been a part of and the Women's Weekend Film Challenge in particular?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how I heard about it. I think it was online, but I was just reading about what they do. They've they were these challenges that they put on in New York is where it started. They did, I believe, three or four challenges in New York. And if anybody remembers the 48-hour film festival that they would do back in the day, where you would basically have 48 hours to make an entire film from concept to completion. So I was familiar with the idea, and I'm like, oh, why would you want to do that? I'm like, I don't want to kill myself. I helped do a few back in the day, and I remember it being fun, but it was, a lot of not sleeping. But I read up on what they were doing, and I loved that they have really great sponsors behind it. They have HBO, they have Zeiss for giving us lenses, and they had Final Draft. They had, oh my gosh, I'm totally forgetting a few, but they had a bunch of sponsors. And the videos that they were producing were really high production value, great storytelling. And I was like, wow, this is really, what an interesting concept to have all women come together over 4 days and get to work on a project together. And they were advertising, they were doing the first Los Angeles challenge. And I'm like, oh, that'd be fun to be a part of. So I applied for the role of the director. This was all volunteer based, the 4 days of work, everybody that was involved. And there was a lot of people that applied. And I was actually chosen to direct one of the 6 films. And, it didn't really hit me until I walked into the orientation day, and there was like 200 women in the room. And I'm like, wow, this is the first.
Yeah.
I've worked with a lot of creative and brilliant women, but to have a whole room full of them, I'm like, wow, this is really happening. Yeah. And I worked with a team of 30 women. I only knew one. Everybody else I had never worked with before. And it was just really like, okay, surreal, visceral, like go with your gut, just know that you have your toolbox that you've been perfecting for a decade that you can draw on and just go for it. So we had 4 days from the start of the prompt and the genre that we got, which was a thriller. And the writers went into a room and we worked on a script. And the next day we shot it. We had 2 days to shoot it. That's what we chose to do. And then we edited it. And a week later, we screened it at an ArcLight theater in Hollywood with a full packed house of 400 people. So,
wow.
There was moments where I'm like, I should just quit. This is too hard. I haven't slept. Everyone's asking me questions about the story, and there's not even a script written yet. And I'm like, I want to pull my hair out. You're like, I don't even know. But it was just like, you just kept going. It's just like adrenaline.
Yeah.
And I was so blown away by everyone's enthusiasm and support. And, of course, there's challenges along the way, but I think everybody was really driven and passionate about doing the work. And actually, Kayla, she was the director of photography. She also shot the series that we were talking about, Dead Girls. She shot that. That's how her and I met.
Cool. Oh, wow.
And she's really talented. She went to Chapman a couple of years after me, and that's how we met. And I asked her if she'd be interested, and so she shot it for me. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So,
yeah.
And my mom was asking here, she says, is that Traci's project? And in fact, it is. Traci Sayer.
Yes.
We made that connection the other day on the telephone that a friend of mine, Traci in New York, she's one of the organizers of this.
It's been great. Yeah, it's been an incredible experience. And all the women, I'm actually working with the composer who composed the film, is composing a thing from, I know I don't want to jump ahead too much, but she's working with me on something that I'm working on right now. So yeah.
Very cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's talk for a moment just about what the collaborative environment is like when you're on a team that is all women. How is that different for you working with that group, and what are the advantages of having an all-female crew?
Honestly, it felt like any other set. Everyone knew what they were doing. There were some people that weren't maybe as experienced, but one thing that I thought was pretty admirable is that the people that had the experience were taking the time to teach the people that didn't have the experience. And I thought and there was no ego. And I'm not saying that it's a male or female thing. I mean, I've run into all sorts of characters in the business. So I think it's just like, I think the only difference, I mean, for me, I didn't know anyone. So it's very rare that I work on a set where I only know one person. So, I mean, whether it was male or female, it was just like, that was a bit of a nerve-wracking experience because you really don't have a shorthand, or you don't really know. I mean, I had legitimately the actors, the AD, like I had never met or worked with any of them. So it was that in itself was challenging, but I think, the craft services was great.
We all important crafty.
I think as women, I don't know, but I just think we're just like food, coffee, that has to be perfect. So we got a lot of sponsorship. Actually, Verve sponsored. So there was a bunch of great sponsors that came together that really. So there wasn't like a massive difference because it was a small crew. I mean, I worked on smaller crews and larger crews, and I think it was it was nice to see women mentor other women, and it wasn't a competition, because I know sometimes I've seen that, which is unfortunate, but it's our business ultimately is really competitive. And I think it was nice. There was, one of our producers had her son there. Like, it was just like women, daughters, moms, all
That's
ages.
Cool. I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. What an experience.
Yeah.
I know you also work a lot with Passion Flicks, which is another female-driven company, and you collaborate a lot with Tuska Musk. And weren't you working on the second part of a trilogy before? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I spent actually almost 5 months in upstate New York from November of 2019 to February of 2020.
Because you love snow. You love the snow.
Oh, definitely not. I am so Californian through and through. But we went out there for a number of reasons, but one of them was obviously that they have a great tax break in New York. So we went out there to shoot, and we had a soundstage, and it was crazy. I mean, I don't think I slept much, but we basically we were there. We shot the first whole film. It's Gabriel's Inferno is a 3-part best-selling New York Times book series, sort of like in the vein of Twilight, and we shot the whole first film, and then we came back to shoot part of the second film that takes place in the winter. So the second film has sort of you see it go through the seasons. So we didn't, we had to come back to LA because we needed to shoot something else. And then of course everything sort of shut down, but yeah, I mean, it was a great experience. I designed, there was like a dozen locations and massive set builds. I mean, we built 5, 6 sets, 7.
Wow.
I don't know. I lost track. A lot of sets. But yeah, I mean, it was really challenging and different because it's a different way of having to work. Because in Los Angeles, you have prop houses. In upstate New York and Syracuse, you don't have anything. You just have, thrifting and Amazon basically. So it was just really challenging because it was a lot of the sets were upscale, and having to time everything right and getting the right people with a skill set to come on board. It was very new ground and challenging, and I felt good about it. By the end of the first film, I felt we had to put together a good team. Right. But it is kind of it's sort of a new territory. It's new. It was probably one of the bigger films that had sort of taken over the soundstage there. So.
Does working with one director more than once, like I know you've worked with Tuska several times, does that help you to establish like a shorthand?
Oh yeah, I mean to the point where we have very few. I mean, she just is like, yeah, I trust you, and she just like comes in. She has very few notes. She trusts me to just sort of deliver based on the conversations we've had in pre-production. We don't even have, honestly, that many crazy long pre-production meetings. We just kind of, she's like, oh, you read the book? Great. Okay. No, I mean, it's more involved, but you get to the point where she just knows that it's going to look good. And it's just like making sure on the day that everything's in the kind of the right place for the blocking. So
yeah, it's great to have that trust. And I know with this series, like it has a large fan base. Does that at all affect any of your design decisions?
150%. I have this probably this film, I've never had fans come up to me and say, "Oh, I can't wait to see Gabriel's apartment and his fern." And I'm like, "Fern?" I was like, "What?" And then I'm like, "Oh my God, there's a fern on the hallway, and we didn't buy one." And I'm like, and you're just like, I mean, it was so specific. Everything in the book is so specific, and I was like, I had to get it right because they knew every inch of that book. So it was a little bit different with other films where there is maybe no built-in audience or a book existing. It's just an original movie. And with this, there was already a pretty heavy fan base. And so somebody commented, I think, "Oh, why did you use a blackboard instead of a whiteboard?" I mean, so they knew. They were very on top of the world.
Wow.
So it was scary.
That's a big responsibility. Yeah.
I was like, I hope I get this right, guys.
Well, thank you for indulging us with so much design talk for a while.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
I would like to jump
Okay,
into your
let's do it.
transition of directing. So tell us about what that transition was for you.
I mean, I think I'm still in that transition, to be honest. I think it's, along the way, I just sort of juggled both. I think it was something that I've always been doing and pursuing and working and developing with multiple writers on multiple projects. And, over the years, I've been fortunate enough to be approached by actors that have projects they wanted me to direct. And so I've sort of slowly built on my portfolio. It started in college where I was able to direct 3 films that I'm very proud of and hold a special place in my heart. And that kind of started my portfolio. So I was able to show people the work. So then it snowballed into other work. So in between design jobs, there were films that I maybe was in pre-production or post-production. I mean, I was on a show when I did the Women's Weekend Film Challenge. I had told them before I took the job, "Hey, I need these 4 days off," but that was it. And it was crazy. I mean, it was the level of stress and focus it's really difficult. I mean, there's sacrifices that you just have to ask yourself, okay, what are you willing to maybe not see your significant other as much, or maybe not going to see your friends every Friday night, or maybe not going to watch a movie for 6 months. I mean, there's all these questions that you just have to go, okay, what am I willing to sacrifice to be able to pursue both things at the same time? Because they take so much work. And, I think I'm still in that transition in terms of the directing design. I think it's this year has sort of picked up traction. I had an article an LA article written about me, so that was really exciting. And it's also just telling clients that I work with a lot that I also direct. It's sort of like, when's the appropriate time to bring that up? Because ultimately I'm committed to the job and I want to see it through, and I don't want them to not think that I'm taking that seriously. And I do the work because I love it, but I also think with directing, it's just so much more, because you have to think about the business side of it, your marketing, your website, your resume, your mentors, fellowships, like anything that can help you rise above the so many other, filmmakers. I mean, it is ultimately part of a business. So it is like, that's sort of where I'm trying to, keep gaining awards, hopefully more with Disconnected. We've already won a few awards, which is awesome. And yeah, we won Best Thriller and Best Director so far. So we're hoping for more, but it's just like being able to be, even though I might have 10 or 12 or however many credits. I mean, you see some directors who have 1 credit and then they do this big movie and you're just like, well, how did that happen? And you're like, everyone's story is different. So it's like, I just want to be able to, focus on, like, right now I have the time to do that and work on updating my reel and my website and talking to people and developing stuff. So I still feel like I'm in transition, but I'm hoping to see a shift. So
great. And how do you feel your background in design has influenced the conversations you have with the designers that come onto your set?
I think for me, it's the first question I ask is, okay, what are you going to see? Because designing 360 versus one wall is a huge cost difference. And that I've seen, unfortunately, a lot of times go to waste, where they're like, oh, just 360 every room, and we ultimately only see one wall. I'm like, I can't spend the money I can't spread out the money to other sets, and you want to be conscious of not going over budget, because if you go over budget on 2 sets, that third set is going to suffer. So it's like, I think there has to be, for me, I understand, like, okay, what lens sizes are we going to use? Where is the camera movement? Like, what are we on? Are we, so all these things, technically speaking, from a director standpoint, I understand just what's important for them, what's less important to them, maybe talking more about the backstory of a character, because I can then implement that more into the design versus just what's on the page or in the book, or stuff like that. So
very cool.
Yeah.
And also, I know, during quarantine, you're working on a little projects. Can you tell us more about how you're staying creative during quarantine and what you've been up to?
Not going crazy. Yeah, I mean, like everyone, they're all finding their own path. And I think I'm without a question, I know it's been difficult for a lot of people and it's stressful. And I think a lot of people are just struggling with it in different ways. I was going for so long on work that I was honestly pretty burnt out. So it's been really nice to be able to rejuvenate and focus on my health and eating better. And in terms of being creative, I've been watching like almost one movie a night. And
Ditto.
like I'm like, oh my God, I haven't done that in forever. I feel like I'm in film school again, because I'm doing master classes. I'm doing, I'm also listening to webinars and classes and workshops and filling out my goals for the year and just trying to it's hard to stay focused on one thing. I find that I kind of am scattered and the list of things to do never ends. And I think it's just like, but I'm still working with a couple writers on 2 different feature scripts. I'm working, I just updated my website with my reel. I finally added some content that I hadn't had in there for a while. And then I'm actually doing a video stay-at-home challenge this coming week, which is something I mentioned in the beginning with my composer, Cora, who did the short with me for Disconnected. So we're working on that. It's more of an experimental film because you're utilizing what we have at home is sort of telling a story. So I'm excited to share. Haven't really done an experimental film before, so I thought it would be a good challenge. So I'll be doing that this week. And then just still being creative in other ways was just, I want to soak in as much knowledge as I can.
Yeah.
While also balancing, like talking to family and, staying connected is so important right now too.
It is. Yeah. How it's rare to have the time to really like sit down and call somebody and talk for a couple hours. When else are you going to have that chance?
No, it's been really encouraging just to hear, how the people are doing and just try to be an encouragement to other people who maybe are struggling with things. But I've just been like super pumped. I'm like every day I'm like, okay, what can I do before I feel like the clock's going to run out. And then I have reality where you're just like, oh, I have no life again.
I want to jump back to the music piece real quick. This is something like I know that I'm very deeply influenced as a designer by music. I know many other designers use music as sort of an inspiration tool. When you're a director working with a composer, what's the conversation like with the composer to kind of find the musical language of the film?
It's like, remember that little part where it goes dee dee dee? You're just like, I sound ridiculous, You're like trying to like communicate. Honestly, it's I start with the playlist. So the playlist I create once I come up with the idea, and then I just play the playlist over and over and over again while I'm coming up with the idea, working on the outline. So when I start talking with the composer, the first thing I do is send them that playlist and go, here's sort of like what I've been listening to inspire me for this. And then the conversation goes, okay, what's the character theme? what's the important energy, because everyone communicates a little bit differently. So you kind of have to look at how, that person and you communicate. But I think it's just like, it's the musical language. I don't know. Like, I'm not like, I can't play any sort of instrument. I can't sing. So I'm just like, okay, this cool drum beat, or, it's just like trying to communicate as best you can with what you think it sounds like. I don't know. I mean, that's sort of how I've done it.
Yeah, that works.
So, yeah.
All right, Traci, time for the big question. What is your hope for the future of the industry?
Oh man, that's a good one. I think ultimately we all want to go back to work. I think we want to go back to work safely and at the right time. And I just hope that, we don't live in, I hope people aren't living, in fear every day. I know it's sort of a hard balance, but I just hope that we can just appreciate this time, but also look to, building a better working environment, I think is so important to everyone's safety. And that's something I always put first in my work, is regardless of what I'm doing, designing or directing, is like making sure my crew is ultimately safe and fed well, because that's obviously the Italian side of me. That's the most important. But I hope that that producers will really take this seriously, but also still have a space to be creative and not be afraid to just have limitations. So hopefully we'll all be back to work soon, and be able to, well, I feel like we'll be in this sort of a transition, like you said, Alex, a little earlier, about just, I think we may end up getting back closer to maybe what we had, but it's going to be a slow transition, where we're, wearing masks and cleaning stuff more often, and how prop houses are. I feel like everyone has their own theory on how it's going to work, but I think my hope for the future is that, we're all safe, and that I'm able to still be able to create and hopefully direct a feature this year. So
great. Maybe the prop houses will finally get the well-needed dusting that they've.
I was thinking that. I'm like, every time I go to Warner Brothers, my nose and sinuses is like on fire.
And also, I did want to mention, because you've mentioned a couple times the importance of good food on set. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, right? I was talking to my housemate at dinner last night about that, and Spike Lee's masterclass. He talks about, when you're starting out and you have no money or no time, you can get people to kind of work for free or deferred payments as long as they're being fed well. So
you'd be amazed how many people don't know that. You're just like, what is this? But 100, food is what brings people together.
It is.
It is. Yeah.
It's love. Food is love.
So let's talk about where people can find your work online, the websites that you have, and also what we can expect from you creatively in the near future, work-wise.
Yeah. So I have two websites. One is for my directing portfolio, and the other is for my design. I just felt like it was better just to have it sort of separate, just so I can send it to different people and be able to keep it more specifically targeted. So Traci Hays Design. Yeah, look at that's so nifty. It's on the screen. And then so the next thing you can see, both my websites have my reel, my directing reel, and the other one has like before. So some of the photos you saw from today that Karen pulled, I have a lot of before and afters on my website, because I think it's important for people to know actually what was done. And then my Instagram too has a lot more before and afters on that for the design end of it. And then what to come next? Well, hopefully I'll have this short experimental about time at the end of the week that I'll put online.
Awesome.
And then I think at the end, there's a couple of films coming out this year that I designed. Karen mentioned them already. So that's exciting. So hopefully, I don't know if they're going to come out in theaters. I know the landscape's a little bit in sort of pause mode right now, but I'm hoping that I gotta go see something in theater at some point this year. And hopefully by the end of the year, hey, maybe I'll even have a feature film in the can.
Yes.
Awesome. Yay.
It was so great to spend this time with you and to see your face.
I know, Karen. I'm like, come, when are we going to see you again? Yeah, I will be, I'm sure at some point, we're just going to get back to it and it's going to be great.
Very good. Well, enjoy this beautiful, sunny California day that you're having.
I am. It was so great talking with you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Hopefully I didn't, ramble too much, and who's ever listening besize my mom. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Traci.
Thank you, Traci.
Thank you. Bye,
guys. Okay, so next week is sadly our season finale. We say season finale because it's there'll be more. Whatever that looks like, right, Karen? We're sort of working on some pretty cool content to bring out at some point in the future, but we need to take a little pause and see what's happening in the world, right?
Right.
Next week, I'll be hosting a few of my friends and collaborators. One of them is Borjana, who's an artist in Bulgaria, who does these beautiful renderings of houses from iconic films. It's an art form that she has kind of taken and run with. It's very exciting work, and I can't wait to talk to her next week, along with my friend Brian Tovar, who's a lighting designer and creative director in New York, who works a lot in experiential design, which is something we haven't explored a lot of here. And then my friend Tony Simotis, who's a theatrical director here in Orlando and one of my theatrical mentors. We're going to talk about our partnership on a couple of projects in town. So you'll get a little hodgepodge of different ideas and personalities next week. Please join us then. That'll be on, it's going to be on, let's see what day, Wednesday. Thank you. I am so not in the loop of what day it is anymore. It's like, is it Saturday or Wednesday? I don't know, but that'll be, I mean, right. I'm not the only one. I can't be. And thanks again, Alan. Alan, why don't you show yourself?
Yes.
Nobody's seen you. Let's turn you on to say hi to our friends.
Hello.
Hi. I've been totally glitchy back here, but I've noticed the stream is very smooth. I've turned the camera off here. I'll try and turn it back on.
Alan gets an A for doing
there we go.
a great job.
Hello.
Right.
Thank you so much, Alan, for all of your work.
My pleasure, guys.
Here.
I hope the stream has been smooth for everyone. I've actually had it on. You can probably even hear an echo in the background. I've been running it on YouTube while we've been on today because on my screen it's been completely glitchy. So, but on the YouTube feed it's been perfectly smooth. So, any delay in switching, it's because I'm about 5 seconds behind over on YouTube.
Well, thanks for figuring out that how to make it run smoothly today with all the glitches.
Oh, my pleasure. You guys can say goodbye without me. I'm going back in the green room. Bye.
Thank you, Alan. And Karen, sadly, this is the last time you're going to be joining us for this season as well. So thank you, Karen. Yeah, this has been really fun. And it's only been, 3 weeks that we've been doing this. And yet we've had so many wonderful guests. And Karen, you're one of these people that I call at 2 a.m. because I know you're going to be up, and we'll end up talking for 2 hours about whatever random movies we're watching. I cherish your friendship and your collaboration when we do work together. And hopefully we'll be on set together again soon with some upcoming projects.
Yes, I look forward to that. It's been great. Thank you for having me on this. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I've loved spending the time prepping with you and discussing everything. We always have a good time when we're working on something together.
That we certainly do. So sending you much love and all of you at home as well. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you soon. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.